Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Creative Insider podcast number 70 with me, Georgi. On podcast number 70, which is another special episode for me, I had a big honor to have on the Bulgarian architect Rositsa Bratkova. Rositsa has co-founded in 2004 together with her husband, Plamen, the highly rewarded architectural studio based in Sofia, AEDES. Their work is characterized by a pioneering design that results in unique forms which are in high contrast to the post-communist context of Bulgaria. Their projects are recognized with multiple awards. They have won 6 times Building of the Year in Bulgaria. They have received a Silver Design Award in Milan and have been part of the Mies van der Rohe selection. In Rositsa podcast, we talk through how this journey has started, how it arrived at this point, and how Rositsa organized now her day between 3 kids, the studio, and her PhD work, which she's currently working on, and also teaching at the university. So it was very interesting. I met her personally in Sofia a few months ago, and it was a real pleasure, real honor. I'm very thankful that she accepted the invitation and then she decided to share the story of their office and the story of an office from a country like Bulgaria, which it's not so much known about. But before we start the conversation, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast, and I want to remind you that if you want, you can support us. You can do that for free by subscribing to our podcast, sharing it with your friends, following our social media channels, which are at TCI Podcast on Instagram and the Creative Insider on LinkedIn. Now you can also help us make a better production of this podcast by supporting us on Patreon with $5 a month. You can receive in advance the name of our guests and submit a question that we might ask. So please do consider doing this, and thank you very much for listening. Enjoy the conversation with Rositsa Bratkova.
The whole world stops just like that.
Hello, Rositsa, how are you?
I'm fine. Hi, Georgi. Thank you very much. I'm pretty fine.
Finally, we managed to do this interview. I'm very happy to have you and very excited to have you for this conversation because as I've told you this summer, not summer, but in May when we met for the first time in Bulgaria when I was there, I've been following somehow indirectly your work. And I've been always curious to discover who stands behind these beautiful buildings around Sofia. And my first experience was with Urban Module, I think it's called, the high-rise you have made. And then after a few years, I discovered Jacqueline and the Red Apple building in Sofia. And I was always curious to discover who is behind those buildings and to broadcast it. And finally, I have a podcast to do that internationally, so I'm super excited. But you can introduce yourself a little bit for the people who are listening with your own words.
Thank you very much, Georgi, for this introduction. I'm very excited. Also, it was very interesting for me and curious when you sent the first email when we met here in Sofia. We had a very, very nice talk. It was very long, and I didn't notice it actually that we had a meeting for 2 hours. By the way, so we have our studio for 15 years now, and we're trying to make everything we do in the best possible way. And it sounds quite easy, but actually it's very difficult to keep up like that. But I think we're getting used to. So yes, we like things to be difficult for us, and that's part of the game.
I'm curious. So what is the name of the studio means? Because it's common. It's a common name. There are other studios and other offices in the world that are called the same. So what does it mean?
It means a lot of things. It's a Latin word. Well, it's a bit funny, the story, but I will be quite honest. So when we were looking for a name, we wanted it to be something international, not a Bulgarian word, and we took the Greek dictionary, ancient Greek, and the Latin dictionary, and because we couldn't read Greek, I still don't know the Greek letters, so we chose the Latin dictionary, and there we just found the word AEDES, and later I found out that there are a lot of AEDES, because it means temple, it means home, house, beehive, tomb. So we thought that actually it means everything that architecture is. So, and it sounded very, very nice. We like the way it sounds, and it starts with A. It's also important.
Yeah, the first letter, and also as architecture, and but you are the AEDES studio in Sofia, so I think it's the only one in Sofia. But with each guest of the podcast, I'm very curious, to discover really the person and the individual behind the creative production, because in all the magazines and books we read, you read more about what people do, but not about who is behind those buildings and designs, why they do what they do, and how they do it. So my first question is, was there a precise moment in your life, in your younghood or in your childhood, when you for the first time realized you could become a professional creative, in your case, professional architect? Is it because it's within your family, or how did it happen?
I think for me it was a long process. It took several years because I was searching for myself what I want to become when I grow up. So I cannot say that I've always wanted to be an architect. In a way, I discovered that profession when I was 9th or 10th grade at school. So my father, he wanted to become an architect, but he couldn't. So he was on one side, who supported me very much. And then there was my teacher in school. He was our arts teacher. And he was very, very keen about me becoming an architect. So both of them gave me the idea, and I started thinking about it, and I really liked it. But it took me about a year, probably, until I realized that I want to try at least.
So that was in your high school time, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. In the middle of high school.
And then did you go for an education at the Sofian Architecture University, or and I know it's very hard to get in Bulgaria. So what was your preparation for the test?
Actually, it was very hard, especially those years. It was very difficult, and I was preparing about 1 year. So maths was really difficult, and we had 3 exams in drawing, 3 different exams. So they all it all took 1 year of preparation. Then it became even harder, and the guys after me, they had to prepare for 2 years, and now things are really different because Well, I'm not happy to say it, but very few people want to become architects, at least in Bulgaria. They either go abroad or they choose something else. So for girls, it's a bit more difficult, but for the boys, there are less candidates than the places. So it's very sad, but that's the truth now. When I was younger, it was much difficult.
What do you mean for a girl? It's hard to get in, and there are less male candidates, and why for the girls it's harder? You meant it's now harder to get in?
Because yes, exactly. Because there are, for instance, 12 female candidates and 2 male candidates. That's why it's more difficult, because there are more.
How many spots there are a year?
Equally. Equally male and female. I don't know how many exactly. They were 50 when I was 50 for girls and 50 for boys. I think they're the same now, more or less 50 or 60, something like that.
But I think is it like really like the spots are split? They have 50 spots a year for guys and 50 for girls, because in all the other I studied in Rome and then I studied in Frankfurt, and there are just 300 spots whoever gets them.
Yes, exactly. There are 50 for girls and 50 for boys, or whatever the number is, but it goes like that. And it goes from the high school. In high school, it is the same. There is an equal number for girls and boys. They tried for 1 year or something like that for the language high schools in Bulgaria. They tried just numbers, and there were classes that year. They had, for instance, 2 boys and 24 girls, and they refused. They gave up. I don't know why it is like that in universities, but some kind of equality. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
the way it is.
That's interesting. I'm surprised to hear that. I didn't know that, although it's Bulgaria. And in your case, did you get in from the first try, or there were multiple tries?
No, just the first try. I got in the first try, and in 5 years and a half, I became an architect. After it was really difficult, these 5 years, especially the middle ones.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And like you said, you were sort of supported by your teacher at high school and by your father, if I'm not wrong. So you didn't know exactly like what it's going to be like. When you got into university, did you have anything? Was it a different expectation from what you imagined before getting in? How it's the world of architecture, and how was your education? Did you have any surprise between what you imagined and what it actually was?
I think yes, simply because I didn't actually know, because until you're in, you don't really know. So I was being surprised all the time, but they were really pleasant surprises. I felt like Alice in Wonderland, and I remember very well in the first year when we started with the first tasks. I felt like this is the thing I've always wanted to do, but I never thought it was a job. It could be a job. It could only be for fun. So that was the way I felt when I started discovering architecture and the things we did at the university. And I think it's still the same for me now. When I think about that, it's fun. It's fun.
And what was your relationship with the teachers? I always ask this question because when I studied myself in Rome, there the teachers are usually some highly positioned architects. For example, one of my teacher was the main architect of the Vatican City, so he was responsible for the Vatican City complexes and buildings, and we had several like this figure, and the relationship, they were very distant from us. They were like just teaching us, but they didn't have any personal relationship. And then when I moved to Germany here, they were very, very open, and I don't know, in the end of every semester you end up drinking beer with your teacher in the school cafeteria. For the semester closing, they do a little exposition with all the projects. What was your relationship in with your teachers? And I know now you're on the other side where you teach students. So how is also your relationship with your students?
Well, first with the teachers. Of course, there are different teachers, but we had a very, very nice architect. His name was Tanko Serafimov. He's gone now, sadly. But he was really an amazing person. And we had several teachers who were really, really amazing. And we were very close, especially with him, but with most of them, for various reasons, but also in the very first year of my first university year, there were very big political protests in Bulgaria. That was in the year of 1997. And all the students, all the universities were outside on the street, and that architect, our teacher, he was making sandwiches because it was a very deep economic crisis, very deep. My mother worked. She's a doctor. She worked in a hospital for $5 monthly. So everything was very expensive and so on. So he was making sandwiches in the room that we had at the university. So we were protesting. Then we went back to the university, and he has already done the sandwiches, made them for us. So yeah, it was. I have really, really beautiful memories from that time. And then when we all graduated, he had that tradition of inviting all of his students to his home for a big party. So we had nice relationships with our teachers. Another one, Georgi Stanishev. I have close contact with him right now, and he's my professor in my study, the things that I do now for the university. So he's helping me with my scientific work. Because, as you mentioned, I'm teaching myself now. I still feel new in that, and I'm discovering, and I'm trying to be close with the students, but it is not always working in the best way. I mean, sometimes it depends on the student. Sometimes if you become very close with somebody, you're not helping him because he starts making worse projects. Just because he thinks you're friends, and that's okay. That we meet just to have a coffee and to have a chat, and so on. So there must be a balance.
Yeah, there is this dichotomy of being close but also not too friendly, because without any pressure there are no gems. Like when people start taking it too easy, it's not good for the creative work. What I'm also curious is like, I've, as I told you, 97, 98, 99, I think was the years when my dad left the country, and because of those economical that economical crisis, and I left the country in the 2000s, and then I grew up in Italy, and then I started studying at school and then at university, and then what I got taught, it was something like also history of architecture. We never studied something really about the Soviet bloc, the communist architecture, a part of a few projects. And I'm always curious because your office is, in my opinion, the best office in Bulgaria. And what kind of education was that in the 90s when the whole country was transitioning from the post-communism time to the Western? So what was your how did they taught you architecture? What were your references? Where did you get the first inspirations towards architecture? What were your archetypes and your models in your education in a country that was transitioning? It was very young in the transition, even from communist country to a democratic country.
Well, probably because of that transition, we were only looking to the West, and we were absolutely not interested in anything that was happening, that has happened in the Eastern Bloc. Absolutely not interested in the constructivist movement, even though we studied them, of course, but because kind of we lived in such kind of a environment, more or less. So we were really, really interesting about what's going on in the West and in the Far East, I mean in Japan. And we were watching a lot of magazines because there was no internet at that time. It sounds really strange, and I myself cannot imagine how it was possible. But yeah, for us there was no internet then. So we watched a lot of magazines in the library, in the university library, and I think that was most of the inspiration. We went to a lot of movies. There were cinemas all over the city, and at that time, that transitional period, we also for a short period of time there was a cinema in the aula maxima at our university, and they we could watch their European cinema, not just blockbusters, but really nice movies, really high quality cinema. And it was nice because after you finish your work at the university, you just go to the aula maxima and go to the movie.
And so you went through these 5 years of architecture school. You graduated. So my question here is, how did your transition from the academic world to the professional world happen? And in these 5 years, what was your core idea or core value about architecture that you had built for yourself to start working?
Well, the idea, the value, I think it kind of appeared later through the years. At a certain moment, we kind of looked back and realized that we have reached something that is probably the beginning of our identity, something that has started to repeat in our projects. And it was like we discovered that we have come to that. But in the university, it was very important for me, for my entire life, that I met my future husband, Płamen. It was in the first year at those protests in 97. And I always knew that we are going to have our office. So we had the chance, we were really lucky to to graduate at that time. I graduated 2002. Yes. And so the time was probably because of the transition, because of our luck or whatever. So we were able to work for 1 or 2 years for somebody else, and then we started our own studio, and we started with a very big building. It was the Jacqueline building, our first one, which for a very long period of time was the biggest of our buildings. It was 2,000 square meters. No, 20,000. I'm not okay with numbers. Sorry, 20,000 square meters. And then it became our biggest success abroad because it became part of the selection of Miss van der Rohe. It was the first and until now the only Bulgarian project that became part of this selection. And we spoke about the name because we're AEDES Studio with A. We were first in the list, while Zaha Hadid, they were at the bottom. So, yeah, I lost my thought.
No, so you were mentioning that you've always knew that you're gonna start your office, and that was but did you start directly the office, or did you first work somewhere after graduation because in Bulgaria also you have to have some practice before you can get your license for an architecture office, right?
At that time, not yet. Because of the transition, there were no licenses when we graduated. So we could start from the very beginning. We graduated as architects, fully grown, so to say. But of course, we started. I worked for he was chief architect in somewhere in the sea. Then he became the chief architect of Sofia later. So I worked for him for half a year or maybe 1 year until I graduated. I was still a student at that time. And when I graduated, I quit with that office and I started with another one. They were family friends, a big group of architects who were very close friends with my parents. Actually, most of them are here right now on that island, somewhere around. So I worked with them for, I don't know, maybe 2 years. And Płamen was working with a group of young architects as young as him. And they were all studying together from each other, learning from each other. And then at some point we just started, the two of us.
And how do you come up with these names for the projects? Because all the projects, when people go on your website, they have names. Like I mentioned, that we have the urban model, we have the Jacqueline, we have the Red Apple. So how do you come up with these names?
These three buildings, they are by the same investor, the same client, and he has this tradition of giving names to his buildings. So we work together in this. And as we started with Jacqueline, I think I mentioned that. So on our website, we continued to give names or letters or just something to the projects. But that with the names, it was his idea of the client. We're an office that works with very few clients. Probably it's difficult for people to work with us. I don't know. So it's difficult and it's easy at the same time because it has pros and cons working with the same people.
But are the names pure marketing names generated by the investor, or you think about what could be the meaning behind it and then you create them?
Jacqueline was entirely his idea. Probably we were very young at that time, and he was not ready to trust us enough. But the other names, I think we worked together on them. We still call the urban module. We call it urban module, and he calls it urban model. But for us, it's module.
And why is Red Apple? I'm really curious about that one, because that building, it's like a triangular building, and it's out of red bricks. I thought it's like an apple where there are a lot of people living inside, because it has a lot of like openings in the facade. Might look like that.
Like worms.
Yeah, like that. Maybe, I don't know, but in a cozy way. I don't know.
No, the story is different because of the bricks. So we started with bricks, and then we added the metal, these metal grids, the balconies, and so on. And when it was almost ready, there were pictures everywhere and so on, and people were talking about it. And everybody was saying that this building is very much New York style. I don't know, probably because of the bricks, because of the metal. And so because New York is the Big Apple, this building was more or less red because of the bricks, so it became Red Apple.
Okay, but my imagination started working in the wrong direction then. Before you said something that your client in the beginning wasn't, you were young and the client couldn't trust you completely 100%. When you two guys started the office and you were just starting as young architects, how did you manage to get this first client that it's apparently also a big investor? Because building this kind of buildings here requires a lot of money. How did you acquire this first client? Because that's always a very crucial moment in a studio history, because without a built building, it's always very hard to get the first client, because you cannot show anything that you have built and nobody can trust you. So how did you manage to do this?
I think there is always a very big percentage of chance in these things, and we had a very good chance in that because at that time that client, he was looking for a new architect. He was working with a name, an architect who has his name already. At that time had his name, and he decided to start with somebody else, with somebody new. And a colleague of Poimen's, she worked for that client in his office, and she told him that Poimen was really a very, very good architect when she knew him at the university. So he called us, and things went on. So I think it was chance, but before that, it was a lot of work for the sake of the work of architecture, because you do something, you do it in your best possible way, and sooner or later it turns out that it was for something else in your life. Probably 10 years later, you discover that you spend hours and hours on something which was not probably very important, or it turned out to be useless at that point, and later you realize that it was really precious. So I understood that anything you do it for yourself, no matter what it is, and sooner or later it turns back to you.
Yeah, a lot of the guests have said similar sentences like yours right now, and I always quote my grandma. She says, "You have to work for your luck." So you have to be preparing for that moment when the occasion comes, because I've always also loved this anecdote about Picasso where he was doodling something on a napkin in Barcelona, and one lady saw what he was doodling, and she said, "Oh, I love your napkin. Could I take it?" And he told her, He told her, "Yeah, you can take it for $10,000." She was like, "What? You were just doodling?" And he was like, "Yes, but to do these doodles in my free time, I needed to study my whole life." So basically, it's something similar. You have put a lot of effort and work, and then the right occasion came, and you took it. What was your workflow in that time at the office? Were you just the two of you, and how has it developed through years?
Well, when we made the office, the two of us, and then came the first project, which was, as I told you, the biggest one for a very long period. So we had to find other people to work with, because also our first son was born somewhere about that time, and it became even more difficult. So we needed other people to help and to work together with. It was a very long way. So we started the office, the two of us, but we actually never had been just the two of us.
But did you had some architect friends from your community with which you collaborated, or did you have like interns from the university, because you're still very tied both to the university, because I know you both teach there? Where do you get your work? Where did you get your workforce, and how is the setup of the office now and compared to back in the beginning?
At first, we started with, of course, with friends, with people from our community, because we have just graduated, and it was absolutely normal to start working with friends. And but yeah, through the years, the first years, we realized that we are either friends or we are colleagues. So we couldn't continue working together and be friends at the office at the same time, probably because we were the same age. And actually the office was done by the two of us. So we established the office, and they were friends and colleagues, but they could come and go anytime. And then we grew up. Now there is a difference between me and the youngest colleague at the office, more than 20 years. So in a way, now it's easier for us. And people come from the university, of course, from our university, but also a lot of people come from abroad, from other universities in Europe. And I think the office is an interesting place right now, because people from all over Europe, from different universities, share thoughts and their way of education in their university. So it's nice to have such experience.
And
it's also very, very nice and easy to work with younger people.
in which way?
I think they're more open, because they're curious. This is very important. I think curiosity keeps you young even when you're older. And they're ready to learn, because if you think you know everything, it's useless. You cannot learn anything new.
And I've asked you before, how is your relationship with your students? What is the relationship that you try to create at the office? I mean, how many people you are, and what kind of structure you have? Because also you guys are the founders and the owners of the office, but I guess that does include also a lot of side work as not only architecture, but a lot of management. In the process, it has been a lot of work in building the structures for the office, so to say, so that you can include these new people in a team to work in a structured way. So how do you try to, what is the relationship that you have created in the office, and what is do you have some sort of hierarchy, like under you there are some project managers, or is it a flat hierarchy? How do you try to organize the office?
We decided, it was several years ago, we decided that we do not want to grow too much as an office, because if we grow too much, we cannot control things. We cannot control the project. So we decided that we found out that there is a limit of not more than 10 people in the office. And right now we have six people. Me, I'm not at the office at that moment, but with Plummen there are 7. And as we are a little small team, we used to have 3 other colleagues some years ago. As we are a small team, we have a flat hierarchy with the 2 of us above, and everyone is doing everything. I mean, when we have a big project and we have the deadline, we're all working on that project, and we do anything that has to be done so that it will be finished on time. And I cannot say that there are people who do this and that, and of course some are better in one thing, another one is better in another, but we're trying to change tasks and so that everyone does everything. And people, they are responsible for some projects, each of the 6. But actually, the 2 of us are responsible for all the projects. So that's the hierarchy.
And by having such a small team, how many projects a time can you take care of? Like, how many projects do you have on the plate every time you are constructing something?
Well, there are too many, really too many, but there are long projects which are sleeping, like winter sleep for a very long period, and now and then something happens and you just send an email or something like that. So all of them, the sleeping, the frozen and so on, all of them are about 20 at a time, big and small. But the big ones are about 4 or 5, not more than that.
Yeah, and how many of those are awakened of the big ones?
The awakened big ones, they are not more than 4 or 5.
Okay, that's still quite a lot. And by having now you have a big portfolio, like as I mentioned just 3 of the buildings, but there are more than that you can see around. And as I was discovering your work, it was funny because I would see a building, then I would go to your website and I'll be like, this is also from them. You have now a very strong brand in the field in Bulgaria. Have you ever had the need to participate in any kind of architectural competitions, or how do you acquire this project now just through your brand? Because now you're very much also a quality, so to say, a quality signature, because there are a lot of quality buildings that have been realized. So do you get only assignments directly from clients, or do you also need to participate in some sort of competitions?
So competitions is a very tough topic in Bulgaria, because actually there are no architectural competitions. there were through the years one or two, but always something goes wrong. And probably the only one which was the way it should be, it was for Metro Station 20. It was an international competition. There were 130 participants from all over Europe or the world. I don't remember. There was the British studio that won the project, and I mean Taha, and nothing happened. Then it was something completely different was done on that for that metro station by someone absolutely unknown, actually by the building company, and so it's well, there are no real architectural competitions. There was a certain period, probably 5-6 years ago, when it was kind of fashionable that clients organized private competitions, closed competitions between 5-6 studios, and they invited us. They always invited us. They always invited the same 5 or 6 studios. So we know each other, we talk to each other, we met at these competitions, and actually we won the Red Apple that way, but they also never work because the Red Apple client was our client before, so he liked what we were doing. It was just it was fashionable to make a competition, but I think he knew from the start that he liked what we do and what the other colleague that he invited. He didn't like his architecture, and he still doesn't. And in all these competitions that we took part in, it was the same story. They usually had one design. They more or less liked it or disliked it, but in the end, they again chose the same design or the project that was closest to that design. And we decided to not participate anymore in such competitions. And besides that, we had really a lot to do.
Well, but do you think that this completely unexisting system of competitions, it's one of the reasons that not anymore a lot of people want to become architects in Bulgaria? Because also if you don't have a strong client behind you that supports the project that you want to do, you won't be able to practice the job. And also in Bulgaria, I also interviewed several people now from there that the business for ArchViz and for CG graphics, it's stronger currently because people can do with easy investment and very low risk quite good money by working for international clients. So is this maybe also like this a little bit closed system of the architecture market that it's stopping the next generations of becoming professional architects?
I don't think this is the reason that is stopping them. Probably this is stopping Bulgaria from having really good quality of architecture. That's the biggest problem. Why young people don't want to become architects? You're right about that. That when they make 3D graphics or for cinema productions, they make money quite easily, and for young people, this is really important. I wouldn't say it's good or bad. I'm not going to moralize, but this is really important for them. And if you become an architect, it's not that easy to make money from the start. It's not easy. It's never easy, actually.
And I'm also curious about the architectural process in general in Bulgaria because I work in Germany, and here in Germany, the way the architects are getting paid, it's pretty much very clear, because we have a huge law of the compensation of an architect, which explains like for each, so to say, the building process is subdivided in phases, and for each phase your client has to pay a certain percent of the building expenses. How is in Bulgaria regulated, and how did you regulate yourself in the beginning when you didn't have any clue how much money should you charge for a big project or for a small project? And how is the market regulated for pricing the work of an architect?
Well, there is the market, you said it. So the market is regulating. This is the first and the foremost regulator. You mentioned Germany. We're always trying to, here in Bulgaria, we're trying to be as Germany, yeah, we always say in Germany it's that way, and in Bulgaria it's much worse. But we actually never can make such regulations as in Germany. I don't believe they're really necessary. So I'm trying to say that we're much different than the Germans, even though we're always trying to take them as example. So we don't feel very comfortable with having a lot of regulations, because I myself don't feel comfortable, because every project is absolutely different, especially when we talk about interior design, about furnishing and so on. So it depends on what the client wants. Sometimes when we talk about a private project, a house with interior design, the client knows exactly what he or she wants, and it's quite easy. There are other cases when they say no, it's going to be very, very fast project, just something very easy as a design, and then it continues for years and years and years, again and again, and it's very difficult to say how much a design will cost, especially with smaller projects. With the big ones it's easier, because you know that you're going to work on that project for 5 or 6 years, and you know that it's going to take a certain resource. So with the big ones it's easier, but you cannot have just big projects.
No, it's funny because I understand what you're saying. Just here the regulations are meant in a way that so the idea behind these regulations, they're meant for bigger projects, like for projects like, for example, urban module, or the one we have mentioned, the big one, and they try to protect the quality of the project. So because also in Bulgaria maybe it wouldn't work, because as you said, the market is not also so huge, like 5-6 studios. Here the market is on a very different proportion. So they through this regulation, which I have seen here, I've seen in Italy too, they try to put a certain minimum amount of money that architects need to have, so that the quality of the design won't drop, because the fear is that one studio can take 3-5 people and offer a very low budget for the project and do a very bad job, and through that the quality of the architecture will go down. And this is the regulation. But I think also that it's fascinating, as you mentioned, that you do this big scale project and also these very small projects that you can do because you have this very small flexible structure of a studio itself. Because here in Germany, for example, the office where I work, it's above 100 employees, so we cannot do flats. We do the whole flat building. We don't do interior design unless it's some friend of the boss maybe, but also in that case will be a couple of million of euros house or something like that. So I don't know. So it's I think it's very interesting to to see that your office does this big project but works as a workshop, so to say, of these 10 people maximum. And what is the workflow that you have to create these ideas, these design ideas? So, for example, you receive this task for, let's say, residential block or something. Do you have, is you and Plamen that does the main of the design work, and then the other put it in place? So do you have a little brainstorming with the team? And then how do you follow the different steps of the project to make it buildable?
Well, if I have to be honest, we are not very democratic in the first phases of the project, actually. So it's usually Plamen and me. Of course, we are the entire office working together, but in the very first steps, we're the two of us, and then of course everybody takes their responsibilities and continues. But yeah, what you're asking, I think we're the first ones.
And what is your process of ideas? Do you start with just pure design, I don't know, subtracting or adding some pieces of this form, or do you do a deep research first of the surroundings? Because I think one very remarkable thing which one of my assistants at the university in Rome told me is like, never be fascinated so much by architects like Zaha Hadid or Libeskind, or because they're brands. They're sort of these high-end clothes, like you want to wear an Armani, so it needs to look a certain way. And the real quality architects, they will do something completely unique each time. And this is what I can say about your project, because if we take the 3 pictures separately or 4 pictures of your projects, then you cannot really say that they've been done by the same person. They might be, but they're not for sure. So what is really the practical design process to come up with these ideas? Do you start with research, or do you start just trying around? You tell me.
Yeah, of course. We start with research of the place, and with a lot of conversations with the client. This is very important because for a building to be built, it's important that the client and the architect work very much closely together, and they understand each other. So it's very important to know what the client likes, so that you can offer him something that he will accept, and this something will be the way you offer it, the way you us make architecture. And so it's funny what you're saying about the difference between our buildings, because we realized at a certain point that behind all of our projects there are the same rules that organize them. We always create kind of open structures of structures of multitudes. Like for instance, there is this Jacqueline building with the kind of boxes, and there is this play between order and chaos of the boxes, and it seems as though they could be moving, and this is just one of the many possible states of these boxes. So this principle of possible variation, I think, gives a lot of freedom and a lot of sense of individuality and openness to each project. So this is a very important principle, which it is in the urban model as well, because there is this movement of the different floors, there is the strict orders of the columns and the openings between them, but then there is the variation of the floors themselves, and there are certain bugs in the system, and they exist in every building. Then in the Red Apple, there is the very strict order of the bricks and the openings. But then there are the bigger openings, there are missing openings. Again, there is this bug in the system. So it seems like you look at the building and you see that there is a very straight principle, but then there are principles which break the main principle. So we create let's say, a main set of principles for the building, and then we start creating other principles to break the first ones, so that we have order and this sense of freedom or chaos or individuality in each building.
I can see that there are the same principles behind each project, but then the project develops in a different direction because every time the materials, the colors, the shapes changes. They're not, I don't know, if I see Libeskind or Zadit itself, you can really say it's that kind of architecture, and that's not your case. And I'm curious, how do you what is the process? Okay, you come up with the idea, with the design, which in the beginning it's very rough design, and then you need to go in the detail. And I guess that also creating this, as you said, these open systems which have variations, and then in the system there is also a bug that it's something that, for example, I'm always comparing it to Germany, that our clients and we as an office, we wouldn't allow it ourselves because it's more an industry approach. It would mean that there won't be a regular floor, which means they will be needing, I don't know, 20 people to develop each floor. How do you organize this then the project in such a small team? Like, how long usually it takes from a project to develop, and if the times are tight, does it involve very long hours in the office? Maybe, I don't know. I'm curious, how do you approach it? Because here, if we come up with this idea, we could come up with these ideas, but our clients would be like, this is crazy, I'm not going to build this, because also the clients are very educated and so on. So I'm curious, how do you make it then from this first idea that you have, the process to make it buildable with such a small team, and how is the work organized?
Well, I have to confess it's not very well organized, but what bothers us mostly is not the uniqueness of the floors, which is true. As you said, there are no two floors absolutely alike,